What's up everyone, it's Endymion, and somehow Wizards of the Coast has taken their pandering to nuclear levels. Because in this video I want to cover all the ways Magic the Gathering is race swapping almost every core character. And later on I'll talk about Baldur's Gate 3 and that bear scene that has the internet freaking out. And how people are defending it by saying bestiality is okay. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself here. But this video will be full of insanity to the point that I feel like I'm being trolled with every headline and reveal. This is all truly insane, but let's get started with Chinese Gandalf because I wish I was kidding. To catch you up quickly, Wizards of the Coast, which owns brands like Magic the Gathering and Baldur's Gate, have been changing the ethnicities of the properties they run in order to get that sweet ESG score. The most famous of these race swaps is Aragorn, who's described as a pale man with grey eyes. Yet Wizard made Aragorn into a black man, which doesn't at all match the description of his character. At first, that's all I thought it was. Aragorn was black now, and they would continue on as normal. But like always, if you give woke identity politics even a few inches, they'll take the whole damn stadium. Now, not only is Aragorn black, but Gandalf is a Chinese hermit wizard, which is yet again another deliberate change by Wizards of the Coast to boost their ESG in the guise of representation. Another character within Lord of the Rings is the graceful Eowyn, who's depicted and written as a woman of pale skin with blonde hair and blue eyes. She's a noble woman of Rohan, and well, she too has been given the ESG treatment. Here's Eowyn now in this modern reimagining, who's no longer a white woman with flowing hair, but a black woman with blonde dreadlocks. Then of course we have Glorfindel, who was once a lord and was considered to be one of the most powerful elves of his time. His depiction within the books and movies have him with flowing blonde hair, pale skin, and striking blue eyes. Anyway, here's Glorfindel in the modern reimagining where he's now a black man with bluish green eyes and spaghetti curly blonde hair, which looks absolutely ridiculous. There's plenty of other artistic depictions within this reimagining that shows Wizards of the Coast has all but erased the original ethnicities of the characters. This was being done in their words to represent the world, which sounds exactly how Netflix approached their live-action depiction of The Witcher. I don't need to tell you that The Witcher at Netflix isn't very good, but it also race swaps many core characters for diversity's sake. And Netflix and Wizards both use the same line of thinking when it comes to defending these changes. That these fantasy properties must represent the real world regardless of being faithful to the source material. I'll let the senior art director of this reimagined Middle-earth speak for themselves, and I quote, "At any given time we are surrounded by diversity, and it is our hope in this world to someday get along and come together despite our differences. It is also a message from us to fans of all walks of life. You are welcome here, you have a place here, you belong." End quote. While this sounds dandy and wishy-washy, the truth is that fans don't need companies to unite them when it comes to their love of media. Oftentimes, bonds are formed between people based on their love of something instead of how they look. YouTuber European Lore had quite a lot to say on this, and they said, and I quote, "So this is the same nonsense that all the huge companies have been talking about for the last couple of years. This is just a publicity stunt. This is just attention grabbing. This is just virtue signaling. I don't believe they are so stupid that they don't know that you don't need to make us unite. You don't need to unite fans. Fans had already been united before you came. Fans had already been united before the Rings of Power came. If you are a fan of something, you will naturally unite and bond with people that like the same thing as you do. And it is most important for you in this particular context that the other person shares your hobby, shares your passion, shares the things that you like. And you are bonding over the things that you enjoy. It is just a publicity stunt to get more attention. As a literature aficionado, I am all about staying faithful to the source material, and there is another thing. All this changing characters into something that they are not. Those groups of people that they are changing the characters to, that the characters resemble those groups, you are actually insulting them by this. By this, you are saying the group we are trying to pander to, you are not good enough to have your own main characters, to have your own original characters. We have to change our superior characters and lend them to you. We have to make cheap knockoffs of the original thing that people have loved for decades. We have to change it into something inferior just to please you, peasant. This is exactly what these companies are doing. They are insulting those groups. And normal people all around the world, they realize it and they reject it. I will always go for originality over some sort of knockoff, end quote. I think European lore said it perfectly here that nothing being done by wizards is for a positive reason. It's simply being done because these people like senior artist Ovidio Cartagena and showrunners like Lauren Hissrich at Witcher Netflix only see people for surface level qualities and then judge them based on that alone. Basically, this is one long-winded way of saying these companies are combating what they perceive as racism by delivering their own form of racism to combat the very thing they want to get rid of in the first place.
We've got them shown as servants or slaves, as well as expendable soldiers, with a particular emphasis on their value being in their apparent willingness to selflessly sacrifice themselves. We see Embereth paladins saying that he'd die for the king. They're also the primary targets of female aggression. Never do we see a man attacking a woman, but regularly we see a woman attacking a man. Ochran Assassin is waiting to stab and poison some knights who are out on patrol. Never Happened shows an overpowered man having information extracted out of his eye by a smug female spy. Mystical Disputes flavor text is particularly condescending and demeaning. Poor lost mage, your feet are on land, yet you're in over your head, aren't you? As the feminine merfolk pulls him into the water. The negative representation of white men continues, as they are almost solely represented in the removal spells. Drown in the Loch features the grisly drowning of a man by a merfolk. Deadly Visit has a soldier sipping tea about to be assassinated. We've got white men being stabbed by ghosts, being toyed with as they have Rakdos knives thrown at them, or being swarmed and killed by goblins. We've got men being dragged off into the Undercity, having their essence reaped out of their faces, men being clumsily knocked off buildings, men being sacrificed to power up spells, and men being killed by sound waves. Men are also the ones who have their spells countered. First, he's getting his brains blown out the back of his head. Then, in Didn't Say Please, we get to see the pathetic weakness of this man as the condescending sprite counters his spell with flippant disdain.
There is nothing forward-thinking or positive about making Gandalf Chinese or Yowen into a black woman with blonde dreadlocks. These decisions are simply being done because these companies truly believe people can only relate to characters if they look like them. They actually can't understand that people of all walks can be united by their love of media instead of being segregated into groups based on how things relate to them. If anything, what Wizards is doing here is the opposite of bringing people together, as moronic and blatantly racist reimaginings like these are just going to divide people instead of bringing them together. And like I've said in previous videos, I do find it oddly weird that this rhetoric that fantasy worlds must represent the real world only matters when the fantasy world in question was created by a white person. Tolkien is English, so naturally his surroundings and how he lived would influence Middle-earth. This doesn't make him racist, it's just very typical that your designs and thoughts are formed by what's around you. So naturally, since Tolkien was surrounded by sprawling green fields and flat valleys, Middle-earth would replicate the world around him. This also meant that the elves, hobbits, and so on would resemble English people because, again, that's where Tolkien lived. The same can be said about Andrzej Sapkowski with Witcher. The dude's born in Poland, which is an ethnically white country because Polish people are white. I know, crazy, but it's true. So naturally, his version of the continent and characters like Geralt, Yennefer, and Ciri would all be direct representations of his life. And doubly so since many of the ghastly creatures Geralt fights within the novels are directly inspired by European folklore. And I know this is crazy for woke idiots to hear, but back in the day at its core, Europe is a predominantly white ethnic area of the world. That's not racist of me to say either. That's like saying China is full of Chinese people and India has Indian people. Crazy, I know, but it's almost as if the world is diverse and certain kinds of people originate from key parts of the world or something. So why is it that properties like Rings or Witcher must represent the world when they were never designed to be based on the world at large to begin with? Why doesn't Black Panther need to represent the world? Why don't game journalists get upset when a game made in China has its cast completely filled to the brim with Chinese characters and Chinese locations with Chinese influences? Why is it okay for other ethnic groups to have their work be respected, but not things made by white creators? The simple answer is that the woke mind virus has tarnished these insane morons and they see white people as the enemy. When I bet you a large portion of the people who have this mindset are likely white themselves. It's like a weird, brainwashed, self-defeatist mentality that stems from the warped ideological melting pot that is today's skewed educational system. White people are taught to hate themselves because it's politically correct, and it's why properties like Lord of the Rings are being culturally appropriated in response. If you placed all of these characters together and told me it was Lord of the Rings, a large majority of people would just think these characters are in some new generic fantasy show. But it proves that these companies will stop at nothing until the origins of the properties they so desperately latch onto for relevance no longer feel attached to those origins. It's quite literally that one Batwoman clip, but on a broader scale.
The suit is literal perfection.
It will be, when it fits a woman.
They don't see things for what they are, but only see them for what they want it to look like. And it doesn't help when the new animated movie set in the Rings universe will feature a female perspective. Warner Brothers Animation are currently producing an animated film called The Lord of the Rings War for Rohirrim. Slashfilm.com reported that the short story, which stars Helm Hammerhand as the main character, will instead be repurposed to inject a heavy dose of feminism into Middle-earth. Instead, the film will follow Hammerhand's daughter, whose name is Hera. The supposed design of Hera has her with red hair and a messy braid with leather armor and a sword, and the film is designed to explore Middle-earth from a female perspective. Even though Helm did have a daughter, she was unnamed in the books and was never an important character of any interest. But of course that won't stop the bastardization, since Rings of Power had Galadriel in a suit of armor girl bossing her way across Middle-earth, when she was never at any point involved in any wars, especially from a physical perspective. Anyway, enough about Lord of the Rings. It's clear it's only being done to pander. Let's move on now to Baldur's Gate 3, which is currently one of the most hyped games of the year for RPG lovers, and it's setting the internet into a frenzy over a romance scene in the game. While YouTube is dumb about this, so I can't show the scene in question, it shows a druid companion shapeshift into a bear and proceeds to make love with the main character. What's weird is that some people are saying the game promotes bestiality while others say it's fine because the animal in question can consent. Yeah. One thing a lot of people on Twitter are pointing out is that places like Kotaku are championing this weird animal on human action, claiming it's amazing and they want more stuff like it. But at the same time, Kotaku is being criticized because they almost always complain when traditional tropes are in games. One article resurfaced where Kotaku complained the game Lost Ark had women in it that wore feminine clothing like high heels and had gender-locked classes. They also notoriously hated that Jill from Final Fantasy XVI was not more prominent in the game and disliked that Jill was in a relationship with Clive. Then of course there's the gamer, which complained that Merrin in Star Wars Jedi Survivor ends up in a heterosexual relationship with Cal Kestis, claiming that she can do better than him and should be with another woman. The reason why I bring this up is because these websites clearly have a biased slant towards representation in games that disregard heterosexual relationships. They enjoy it when games promote things like bestiality or other genders and sexual identities, but they also revolt when a game dares show two adults who are straight who love each other. And it's not surprising that Kotaku loves the fact a bear can resize their holes, but it's really weird when I checked forums on this and found people defending the idea that animals can consent. The whole bear screwing a human is weird, but then again, this also reminds me of that other demographic who's into Japanese characters that look like little kids, but it's totally fine because they're actually 1,000 years old, even though they look exactly like children. The term for that is called lolly, and it's a genre of media where young girl characters appear in romantic and oftentimes sexual contexts, which is just weird to me. But the same people who like and defend that sort of stuff are probably also cool with animal intercourse. The whole thing just rubs me the wrong way, and I really don't know what to say about it, because Larian will keep it in the game regardless, and if I ever do play Baldur's Gate, I will definitely not seek out that romance path myself. But I do find it interesting that the same sites and groups that champion weird kinks like these are almost always appalled by hetero relationships, even when, you know, almost the entire population is like that. Do I think Larian should ban the bear scene? No. I just think Kotaku is ran by a legion of weirdos who can't help but get their loins going whenever something depraved gets championed, and it's very telling, is all I'm saying. Anyway, this video is long enough, but let me know what you think about the Lord of the Rings race swapping everyone, and what's your opinion on things like Baldur's Gate 3's romance scenes? Sound off in the comments below. Thank you for watching as always, like the video to help the channel out, and subscribe to see more. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.